رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We send peace and blessings upon our beloved messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, upon his family, his companions, and those who follow them until the end of time. So first of all, I have to really apologize to you and the organizers. I was under the impression that I was actually teaching my book for the last 3.5 months. So I'm not going to be teaching the subject that was advertised. And it's you can just blame me, but I shipped like 3,000 books here or something, so they're outside if you want to grab the book before we start the course. I'll do my best to try to tie it into to the topic that you guys are talking about, the seerah of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But at the same time, the entire seerah and the life of the Sahaba is based on having faith and understanding faith, and being able to answer certain questions about faith. Without Iman, you have no Sahaba, right? Without Iman, you don't have Mu'jizat. Without great faith in Allah, you don't have bravery. So maybe in the second break, if you're interested, this is the text. Ahmed's outside, we can sign them later. And then if you take the whole text with me, I can write you, inshallah, an ijazah in the text, inshallah ta'ala. But my sincerest apologies to the organizers, who just yesterday I wrote them, I thought I was teaching my book, and they're like, no, we're doing seerah, so that's my fault. Don't blame them. And then also at the same time, العلم خير ما يسعى إليه. You know, whatever we learn, there's good in it, inshallah. And I think also the opportunity to read a book with someone who converted to Islam in this country as a young person who finished a degree in education, alhamdulillah, in this country, taught in schools for a number of years, studied with a West African scholar, memorized the Quran, went to Egypt. It's also an opportunity because we need to start thinking about educational tools that have been constructed within the context of where we are in this country, and deal with some of the challenges. So for those of you who are really upset, you don't have to stay. There's a good coffee, I think, at Starbucks. And for those of you who are patient, العلم رحمة بين أهلي. One of the great qualities of learning is to be merciful. So I will try to tie this into the areas that I've been asked to talk about, but admittedly, my specialty is not also seerah. My specialty is qira'at, Arabic language, and sharia. This is what I've done my whole life. So I was equally as excited to come and listen to the speakers talk about the seerah, especially when I thought I wasn't going to have to speak. Alhamdulillah. So please forgive me, and don't blame the organizers, because it's not their fault. Wallahi, they sent me at least 1,000 emails. The problem is I don't read emails. May Allah put tawfiq and barakah. And this is not a mistake or a shortcoming we should be blaming people. Right? Things happen. But I will try to tie this into the seerah. So there's a few things I will challenge you to think about as you live in America. And that is, number one, the Prophet ﷺ, how do the books of seerah always start? How do they always begin? They always begin with 2 chapters which are exactly the same. The first is the Nasab Sharif, the lineage of the Prophet ﷺ, which is agreed upon to Kenan. After that to Sayyidina Adam, there's no agreement amongst the scholars. And then there's a second chapter, which is really uber powerful, especially if you live in America and you're young in the age of Trump, and you're faced with all of these intersectional challenges. And as a community, if you're a person of color, or Muslim, or a woman, there's so many things rocking your world right now. You're getting hit in the face every day. Every single day, if you look at Twitter, there's something there that brings you down, that scares the crap out of you. It freaks you out. And in the face of that, you find in the second chapter of the seerah something really powerful. And that is that all of the scholars mention the good qualities of who? Not Muslims. No, there were no Muslims then. There were no Muslims before the Prophet became a prophet. So they're mentioning the good qualities of what people? I can't hear you.
Not just the Arabs. What type of Arabs? The ratchet, idolater Arabs. Arabs who were steeped in evil. And still the scholars would say, these people were horrible, but these are good qualities about these people. Now, what are the good qualities of the people in America for Islam who are not Muslim? I asked this question to young people and they told me, is this halal? Can we think like good qualities of kuffar? Why would that be in every book of the seerah? Sifat al-Mahmuda, the good qualities of the buck wild ratchet Arabs. Why is that there? And then I'm living in a country where a myopic and monolithic view is the convenience of this country at this time. We're very divided, it's very polarized, based on a myopic understanding of each other, failing to engage and talk with people, right? Here our scholars are teaching something that the seerah and the success of the Prophet ﷺ in the early days is really rooted in having discernment and nuance and engagement. I mean, let alone non-Muslims, how do we treat fellow Muslims? Right? Well, someone may make a mistake, someone may look differently, someone may pray differently, someone may speak a different language, they may be of a different ethnicity, and we mistreat them because we don't take the time to know them. لِتَعَارَفُوا. The second lesson that happens early on that I think is important, especially we're in Chicago, this is the city of Saul Alinsky, Ed Chambers. You know, this is the city which really gave birth to community organizing in many ways. Is that if you look at who converted around the Prophet ﷺ, you see that every social demographic was represented. You had a slave, you had a youth, you had a woman, you had a businessman. So Sayyidah Khadija, Sayyidina Ali, Sayyidina Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Bilal represent every social demographic of Mecca. And if you think about the idea of entry points, these people are giving the Prophet utility, social utility, because now you can engage slaves, you can engage women, you can engage rich folks, you can engage youth. Now, strategically, institutions, organizations, and communities, if we're really going to be honest about ministry, whether it's within the Muslim community or outside of the Muslim community, are we engaging all of these demographics that make up America? Or do we have like a little guys club where we just hang out? For example, women's participation. There are more than 239 verses of the Quran that deal with women and address women, speak to women's issues, talk about women's issues, engage women. Yet, at an institutional level, it's very rare to find women even on the board of a masjid or a nonprofit. I remember in the 90s, MSAs had a debate. Can women even be on the board of an MSA? Yet there's 239 verses in the Quran, or 49, that address women. Khadija, radiyallahu anha, is really the venture capitalist who supports the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when we talk about seerah, you know, I get concerned when we study seerah just to know, did this really happen? Did that really happen? Did this really happen? Listen, we got to worry about what's happening now. In this weekend in Chicago, 21 people were injured by gun violence. 4 people were killed. We have a police force that's like out of control. We have a mayor who still doesn't know who he is. I mean, these are very real challenges. How do you take now the seerah and turn it into individual and organizational and institutional policy? That would really be my way of teaching the seerah, although I'm not a specialist in the seerah. How can anyone study Hulful Fudul and then ask if we should be participating in politics? It's right there in front of you. The Prophet ﷺ said, if I could go back, I would participate in this. And that's one of the exceptions in Usul al-Fiqh. When the Prophet says, if I could go back and I would do it, then it became part of Nubuwah. Because there's a difference. Anything that happened before he was a prophet, some scholars say it's tashri', some scholars say it's not tashri', it's Islamic, it's not Islamic. But if he says, I would go back and do it, and he says that as a prophet, his role now is affirming that he would what? He would do it as a what? As a prophet, so it becomes prophetic. The other aspect that I think we should think about, it looks like I'm contradicting myself in talking about the subject, after talking about looking at the good qualities of really bad people, you know, that's how we should really rephrase and rewrite the second chapter of Sirah. The good qualities of really ratchet human beings. The good qualities of bad people. And also maybe in my own life, like as a Muslim, like how many young people, either whether it's at the ICNYU, where I work in Manhattan with Imam Khalid, or whether it's on Snapchat, a young person will send me a text and be like, my mother is telling me I'm going to hell. It's like the worst thing you can say to your kid, man. My grandmother's from Oklahoma. She's a country woman. She was like really staunch Christian lady. So, you know, when you get like 12, you start to get bad. And she said to me, you know, you're gonna go to hell. And it was like 3 years of hell. You can go to hell, you're gonna go to hell, you're gonna go to hell. So one day I said, what's after hell? Like, hell don't work no more. Like, I'm not scared. Like, you've said hell so many times, like, what's after Jahannam? Like, ma fish ay haga ba'da Jahannam khalas. So I said to her, there's nothing after Jahannam, I'm good. Like, I beat that one. Right? So when we take our children and tell them they're gonna go to hellfire, Allah hates you, Allah is displeased with you, you know, we are really becoming supporters and outsourced workers of shaitan. Because it really, really brings them down, man, and destroys their sense of hope. Al-Ghazali said, fear is only good as long as it leads to inspiration. Right? Fear is only good as long as it leads to inspiration. If my creating fear becomes counterproductive, then that leads to al-yas, right, where people just give up. So maybe also studying that, hey, you know, all of our scholars took the time to write like really awesome qualities of these crazy evil people. Hey, what are my good qualities? I'm not that bad. Like, I do some things good. Maybe I'll find some hope. Secondly, we said as an institution and as organizations, making sure that within our sphere of influence as an institution and as an organization, right, we are engaging the demographics that make up the constitution of that institution or organization. And the third point I'll make before we get into the last point and start is the need for emotional and clinical care in our communities. We take this from the Sirah. You know, the early examples of the Sirah and the early examples of how Revelation starts are really an opportunity to appreciate tragedy. I mean, the Sirah, in many ways, although it is a very kind of, at the end, you know, there's some beauty to it, there's a lot of tragedy in the Sirah, right? You're talking about a single parent child. That's how we should, where is the khutbah about single mothers, man? Sayyidina Muhammad, Sayyidina Ismail, Imam al-Bukhari, Imam Shafi'i, Salahuddin Ayyubi, all these people were children of single mothers. Imam Shafi'i is from Palestine, he's an orphan. Palestinian single mother. Very powerful narratives here. And Sayyidina Muhammad, Sayyidina Isa alayhi salatu salam, is a mu'jiza born of a single mother, is a miracle born from a single mother. And Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam was born without a father, and the strongest opinion is that his father had died before he was born. Born into poverty. His family at that time, Banu Hashim, were below or on the poverty line of Mecca. That's how we should be understanding this. If our love for Prophet Muhammad is sincere, it's going to calibrate empathy to those around us who intersect with the same problems that he experienced. So when I see orphans and children, the largest number of homeless people in America are children. I'm affected by that as best I can. It doesn't consume me, it doesn't destroy me, it invigorates me. When I look at people suffering with poverty, I remember Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam suffered through poverty. So now I'm calibrating the seerah and it's becoming a living seerah. I want to challenge you to become a living example of the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Not just our problems we want to learn. No, we need to live. Learning creates arrogance. Living creates humility and nuance. When we study, we don't study to learn necessarily. We study to live proper lives. And then the Prophet loses his grandfather, alayhi salatu wassalam. Then he loses his uncle. And he loses his wife. He loses his friends and his community when he starts to speak the truth. Oftentimes you may feel like, I can't go to the hookah bar anymore, man. I got to tell these people I got to stop. But if I stop, they won't be my friends anymore. That's prophetic. I don't want to spend Qiyamul Nahar in front of the Sephora lounge. I got other things to live for. I'm tired of catching up with the Kardashians. I want to catch up with Jannah. Right? Maja, make Jannah great again. Right? I'm tired of this. But I know that if I make these kind of decisions, I'm going to lose my friends. I may lose people who are no longer like really going to be down with me. Well, then they weren't your friends in the first place. You were friends for dunya. You should be friends for akhirah. So the Prophet has to make this decision. He loses the whole city. He has to leave the city. In Medina, loss after loss, death, and he dies. So really the seerah in the early days especially teaches us the importance of emotional and clinical care. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes to the Prophet and says, وَالضُّحَى وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى مَا وَدَّعَكَ رَبُّكَ وَمَا قَلَى. He doesn't say وَمَا قَلَاكَ, if you understand Arabic. It's translated wrong in English. He said, by the dawn and the night that's still, your Lord has not left you. مَا وَدَّعَكَ وَرَبُّكَ ka means you. وَمَا قَلَى, the word قَلَى means to hate. It doesn't say وَمَا قَلَاكَ. In Arabic, you would say that. Makes sense in Arabic, but the Quran is above Arabic. The Quran teaches Arabs their language. So it says, وَمَا قَلَى doesn't mean your Lord has never left you, or your Lord is always going to be there for you, and your Lord hates you. It doesn't say, and your Lord hates you. It says, and your Lord doesn't hate. It will never even to teach imply that Allah hates Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You understand what happened? So the object of the second verse is gone. When it talks about hatred, it says, مَا وَدَّعَكَ رَبُّكَ, your Lord has never left you. وَمَا قَالَى, doesn't say وَمَا قَالَكَ. And he doesn't hate. Even though it's understood he's talking to Sayyidina Muhammad, even to reaffirm his value and his psychological well-being and his emotional stability, even to teach, he doesn't say, your Lord hates you. How many times have we tried to intimidate community members into becoming domesticated Muslims, telling them like Allah hates you, Jannah hates you, angels hate you, community hates you, the Imam hates you. And where am I supposed to go? Only one that doesn't hate me is Dr. Drew. So really you take a few lessons from the beginning of Revelation. Number one, as I said, good qualities of bad people. Number two is making sure that we engage the demographics around us in our community. Don't talk to me about communities that aren't in your community. That's your nafs talking. I want to save the world. Well, save your community first. Right? Work with the real demographic representation that's in front of you. And the third thing that we talked about is, the idea of tragedy and emotional mental health. That's why I believe most masajids in America have to have, and you clinicians in the audience, this is a call to you. You need to go and volunteer your time. At the ICNYU in Manhattan, where I live, of course, Manhattan, you need a clinician. Just because of rent. We have a full-time, Sister Hala, full-time clinician who works with our young people. She's booked. Now in Rutgers, they're going to bring on a clinician, mental health care, emotional health care provider in Princeton, but also masajid. In Boston, I think we saved like 33 marriages by bringing in people who would look after the emotional health of the community. Not just the cognitive health and physical health, but the emotional health. And that takes us to the book that the Prophet ﷺ begins to scaffold a community on the foundations of faith. So this book that we're going to go through is a translation of a classical text taught in Azhar, where I went to school in Egypt. May Allah restore it back to some semblance of normality, inshallah, and freedom. And this book will do two things. Number one, it will help you in your relationship with Allah. Number two, it will help you engage in public life. Because the Prophet ﷺ in the early days in Mecca is teaching people really two things. Number one is maraqaba of Allah. Is being aware that Allah is part of your life. You have a relationship with God. Right? It's not like a distant relationship. Inna Allah la yakhfa alayhi shay'un fil ardi wa la fis sama. Nothing is hidden from Allah. Al-Hayyu al-Qayyum. And that's extremely important when you think about the social stratification in Mecca. When you can tell someone like Bilal, or someone like Suhaib, or someone like Yasser, his mother, Ammar bin Yasser's mother, like, you have a relationship with God. But I'm a slave. No, but you have a relationship with God. I'm poor. No, you have a relationship with Allah. And Allah is transcendent. And at the same time, for rich people like Abu Bakr, who have opulence and they're living that good life, you have a responsibility. Ar-ra'ahu staghna. That's why the beginning of Mecca talks about this idea of autonomy and hubris, right? The dangers of wealth. So it reminds wealthy people that you have a responsibility, right? You have a responsibility. So it's powerful, this message of Tawheed, and it impacts people. I would concur that many American Muslims for the last 20 years have learned Tawheed, but we haven't lived Tawheed. We've learned how to fight and argue, and we've learned how to destroy our communities and create different groups. I've experienced that myself. Whereas the Prophet ﷺ, he anchors the community with God. As if to say, look, whatever happens, success, failure, good times, bad times, la tafra, la tahinu, wa la tahsanu. Allah says, don't become overly happy, don't become depressed, and don't become sad. Like, as Sayyidina Ali said, kun ma'Allah. Right? La tafrah bil ghina, wa la taqnut bil faqr. Sayyidina Ali used to say, don't get happy with money, Bitcoin. Right? And don't get sad with poverty. Just be with God. How am I with Allah? Is to create a living idea of Tawheed. So scholars, anyone here took the course with me 2 years ago here? No one, subhanAllah. And in that course, we went over what are called the Mabadi of al-Ulum. Right, there's an organized system for our Islamic studies teachers. That's why I also wrote this book. Like the need for like quality, organized materials to teach with, man, that are rooted in a orthodox understanding of Islam, but address the questions of the era. When I look at resources in the Muslim community, I saw two challenges. Classical books that are translated linguistically, but not translated contextually and culturally. So you're reading this classic book, you're like, I don't understand what's going on. It's like English, but I'm lost. Same thing happens to Arabs. If they read old Arabic texts, they're like, what? Al-Jawhar, wal-Arad, wal-Ajza, what? I don't understand any of these things, right? Secondly, we find books that are like hip and cool and awesome, but aren't rooted in orthodoxy. And that's really emblematic of our community as a whole. Like we have all these issues that we're very passionate about. We go back to the well of religion. We're not finding answers. And that creates a sense of frustration. And that's the fourth point, that when the Prophet taught people, he kept it relevant. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But he did not sacrifice principles. So there's foundationalism, there's ta'sil, and there's siyaq. Right? There's rooting people, grounding people in orthodoxy, and then addressing the issues of the age. And you young American Muslims, especially millennials, you're like a ball of awesome. People hate on millennials all the time, right? I really don't see you as a coddled, let me word this properly, fresh, unique snowflake that fell from the heavens. I don't see you that way. I see you as a generation that's angry because you were not given a world that you were promised. Like, that's dope. Like, I love the fact that you're mad about the polar bear that couldn't find food. Like, that's dope. I told my daughter, like, that's what's up. I'm glad that mumble rap is popular and you're mad about it. That's good. Right? I understand that you're angry that black children are being killed by people they pay taxes to keep them alive. I appreciate that anger. So I try to tell Generation Xers and those who are also mad at, because the people older than me are also mad at us too. It's like they're not coddled and necessarily babied. They're like a mad generation because you gave them a world that was supposed to be, after Obama, post-racial, and it's not post-racial. Right? The occupation still happens. Right? Ahad is in jail. Right? Lord canceled her contract. Praise the Lord. Her concert. Right? This is an angry generation. And that anger has to be rooted, man. Because anger, when it's not controlled, sometimes can create problems. So the Prophet ﷺ, he understands like the traditional emotional kind of needs of his community, and he begins to root them in tawheed. Everything goes back to Allah. وَمَا تَوْفِيقِي إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ تَوَكَّلْتُ وَإِلَيْهِ. So this book really comes in that vein. It's from the Mabadi of Ulum, the 11 major subjects that we taught in classical Islam. And the first subject that always was taught was Aqidah. Always. Iman. Faith. Why? Because when you learn a text like this, you're learning principles. This is how you should think. Not only how you should think about life, but when you run into verses of Quran that make you say, what? Or hadith that say, huh, what? You'll have some principles in Aqidah, in faith, in theology that will help you immediately interpret it properly. And that's why in the classical Muslim system and how we teach at Swiss, my institute, shameless plug, I don't care. The first course you take is theology. Because theology does really two things, three things. It gives you the interpretive lenses to see life in texts, to make sense of the mayhem outside of the world, as well as our own challenges when engaging the sacred. That's a real thing that happens. Right? Sometimes we pick up verses of the Quran, or we hear some Islamophobe say some weird stuff, or we hear a speaker unfortunately say something that's really, out of pocket. I've got some interpretive tools that are going to help me navigate this. We're not giving people interpretive tools. We have been entertaining the American Muslim community for 30 years. We haven't been educating them. And that's a challenge. That's a concern. Right? So then when you got that high, I'm ready to go, and then you take a philosophy class in college, and you're like, man, the buzz is wearing off. Like, I don't have answers for these questions. I feel good, like I'm so motivated, but I don't have the beef to respond. The Prophet ﷺ gave his community foundational beef. He gave them lahma. وَبَعْدِنْ أُمْعَالِي. He didn't start with the sweet, he started with the beef. Because that takes us to the second goal of theology, to prepare us for public life. Unfortunately, our attitude towards Islamic studies has always been like, be careful, like don't go outside, don't go to the mall, don't go here, don't play basketball, don't wear those D-Rose Adidas, blah, 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 don't do this, don't do that, don't do that, no, not that eyeliner, no, not that, no body sculpting, no. And that's why our community, whenever we have the opportunity to ask questions, we always ask, is this haram? Is this haram? Is this haram? It's a great thing, don't get me wrong. But it's indicative of like, where's, for example, the question like, so based on Palestinian liberation, is there like intersectionality between us and Black Lives Matter? And what would the Quran say about that? That's what I'm talking about. So like in Surah Kahf, when they like silently pulled away, is that a justification for like a silent muqatta'a? That's how I want to read the Quran. When I read Surah Yusuf, like, was the shirt from Nordstrom's rack? Like, was it TJ Maxx? I'm married, so I know about all this stuff, man. Before you get married, you be shopping at Polo. After you get married, TJ Maxx, Nordstrom's, and you actually learn. You can find better stuff there, mashallah. Even the Goodwill. Yeah, Macklemore would be proud. But the point is, where is that type of theology and sense of questions? Theology is about asking questions and then applying our understanding of life and tawheed to the world. When I read Surah Yusuf, that's a question you get from people, man. Like, what kind of shirt was it? I don't care. Like, I don't know what kind of shirt it was. But why don't we look at Surah Yusuf like this? He was an abused child. He's a victim of child abuse. We have children in the Muslim community who are abused. We have adults in our community who are abused. Serious trauma. Number two, he was a trafficked human being. America is the largest recipient of sexually trafficked human beings in the world, after Dubai, of course. No Muslim should go to Dubai, by the way. Haram. You shouldn't go there. Why would you go there? They're supporting occupation. They're bombing Yemen. Why would you go there? I'm serious. I know it's going to get me in trouble, but I went once, I saw all that alcohol, I was like, I'm out. Right? It's different than here. Third is that Sayyidina Yusuf is the object of sexual harassment. Can you say Me Too movement? وَهَمَّتْ بِهِ وَهَمَّتْ بِهِ وَهَمَّ بِهَا. You know, he was the object of being sexually, the object of sexual harassment. That's how we should be reading the chapter. We're worried about the shirt. He was part of the prison industrial complex, was he not? He did a service in prison. Was he paid for it? It's a prison industrial complex at its finest. And here's something that really blows people's minds. Yusuf was a person of color. He wasn't a white boy. And when I say this, I said this once, a person met me outside, but he was handsome. What? Have you ever seen, have you ever seen Idris Elba? Oh, I'm with my wife watching TV and Idris Elba comes on? Nah, man, we changed it. Man, let's watch basketball. Watch the game, man. Bulls can't beat the Celtics. Yes, watch this. No, seriously, like, we have some serious subliminally sick problems in our community, man. I said that. A person met me outside and said, but wasn't he white? I said, what? No, man. He's a person of color. Part of the prison industrial complex. He becomes part of the 1%. Like, his story is amazing. He becomes a baller. He starts clocking mad presidents more than the Smithsonian. He becomes a very rich person. So in the story of Prophet Yusuf, it's not just about the shirt and, you know, what his hair was, and did he use gel? No, it's a story of a person who goes to really almost every demographic you can think of in this community that we live in now in America. So the Prophet is able to take, and our community is so insecure and so scared, when you push them to become relevant, they say to you, you're a modernist. You're changing the religion. Nobody changing the religion, we're trying to live our religion. I would rather be brave enough to live my religion for the future than a coward to live in the past in the name of the sacred. So this text, inshallah, that we're going to start, will lay down the foundations of faith. But as I said, the early stages of revelation are about community organizing, utilizing resources, having people around him of different social, economic backgrounds, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, emotional health. Khadija, Zamiluni, come here, baby, I got you. Like, that's how we should understand that moment. We shouldn't sanitize that moment to the point where it's like, okay, you're fine, you tell the truth, you're an awesome guy. No, I'm sure she's like, baby, you good. You can do this. Like, I feel that. I don't feel you're awesome. I'm so proud of you. How's the mountain? That's not how that went down. And then rooting the community in foundations. Now, when we talk about teaching theology, scholars really took two approaches, and I'll mention this quickly. One of them was a literal approach that used rationality, and that would be the Salafi school. A school that roots itself primarily in texts. It says, listen, for everything we believe, there has to be a text. And limits interpretive engagement, although Ibn Taymiyyah really did a lot of incredible interpretation, rahimahullah. That's one side of our coin. On the other side of the coin, we have the majority of Sunni scholars throughout history. It doesn't mean that they're right or wrong because they're the majority. It's just a historical fact. We don't have to read everything with like a partisan lens. It's just a fact. Right? Every book of tafsir was written by mostly from these kind of people. And their imam is Imam al-Razi. So on this side of theology, the approach of theology, a more of a literal based, textual based, not literal, textual based is a more responsible word I should use. Textual based approach that relies on rationality. The imam of this era, since, you know, really the 8th century, is Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah. He's not an evil person, just avoid all that nonsense. On the other side, you have a school that really starts in the 2nd century and 1st century after Hijri, which relies on rationalism and texts. So this school is textual based with some rationality. When I say rationalism, what that means is they actually developed a school of interpretation that's based on logic. That logic, they cleaned it up. They made it Islamic. They transformed it. That's why in any classical school, except in Saudi Arabia, one of the core subjects that you have to take is mantiq, is logic. I had to take logic in high school in Azhar. I was like, man, this Arabic word is weird. Aristotle. They were like, Aristotle. I was like, what? Yeah, Azhar, man, bump that kafir, dude. It's like, no. You gotta learn. And the imam of that school is Imam al-Razi. Imam Razi, unfortunately, gets kind of dismissed, but this guy was a G. Like, mashallah. He and Ibn Taymiyyah are both incredibly brilliant people. And in that school, the approach is we teach universal rational principles that are supported by Quran and Sunnah. Because the goal of theology is not only to help us have a relationship with texts, but universals, al-kulliyat, right? Al-maqasid al-kulliyah. These universal principles prepare Muslims for public life. So that the engagement now with people around you is being furnished by your education. Now, I would argue, I've been there as a convert, correct me if I'm wrong, I can't project my own experience on you, but I felt there were times where when I was engaging the public as a convert, I really could not tell them about our tradition. I had to like translate it. You know, so they'd be like, so what do you believe about like the dowry? And you're like, can't quote that text, can't quote that text, can't quote that text. Okay, let me just go freestyle. We've all been in that situation. Why didn't you celebrate Christmas? Right, you can say, you know, it's an easy answer, but sometimes it's hard. If you're in high school, sometimes you can't just go straight to the text. So there's a reason that these scholars developed a school of rationalism, which is rooted in Quran and Sunnah, and then brought back to Quran and Sunnah, is to prepare, and this is genius, to prepare Muslims for public engagement. And that meant three things. Number one is to deal with my own doubts, to deal with my own desires, and then to become now a router of these universal Islamic ideas in the societies that I live in. Because here's something I want you to think about as we finish, and we'll get started on the text next session. When you talk about the rationalist Sunni school, this is the textual Sunni school, this is the rationalist Sunni school. If you took a Venn diagram, both of these groups fall in Ahl Sunnah. This is extremely important to remember, and we should be holding religious leadership accountable that says that either of these groups are not from Ahl Sunnah. That's a disaster. Because if you start here, you have people on the far left who said the mind before texts. Then as you come closer to the center, right at the center is Razi saying, no, text before mind. Like, sami'na wa ata'na to Allah, we obey Allah. But rationalism was something used by the prophets. When Prophet Abraham said to the people, you see the moon, you see the sun, you see the stars, is that your God, is that your God, is that your God? He's using what? He's using logic, right? Then over here you have people that were so literal that they said any interpretation leads to disbelief. That's a problem, as we will discuss later. And as you get closer to the center, you find the school, al-Athariyah, of people like Imam Ibn Taymiyyah. So if you're going to Venn diagram it, and especially for the people in the Islamic movement, oh, sorry, I know I'm not supposed to use that word anymore. Those people that are involved like in Islamic work, it's important to know that in that Venn diagram, this school and this school did not disagree on one verse of Quran. The Ash'ira and Athariyah, Hanabila did not disagree on one verse of Quran or one authentic hadith that dealt, what I meant is its existence. They may have differed on the interpretation, but not on it being used. That makes them Ahl Sunnah. Everybody understand me? Especially for Nuqaba, you people who are Naqibs, you people that are content providers, you people that are leading MSAs, you need to know this stuff because one of the most important things you do is equalize problems and equalize differences. The book that we're about to study as we finish comes from the second school. I would argue that a lot of you have been exposed to this school. You learn verses of Quran, this is what we believe, mashi, alhamdulillah, khush, yani imshi ala tul. Idhab anta rabbuka faqatila. Go ahead and handle it. But we live in a society now where I would argue that the robust opulence of this society, the heathenism with impunity of this society, its disregard for a faith-based set of understandings demands that we also engage this school. So I think American Muslims have a great opportunity where they can marry both the pristine need for text, because also we have in the Muslim community people going so far left that they're going to throw us off also. That's that textual rooting that we need. And then as we engage people who may have textual understanding or may be just completely lost, You gain them with rationalism. So both schools are needed for America. You understand what I'm trying to say? You really need both. And that's why Imam As-Subki, Tajuddin As-Subki, is a great scholar from Egypt. He lived hundreds of years ago, 8th century scholar. He did this in Usul al-Fiqh, in a book called Jam' Jawami'. He brought together the Hanafi madhab and the other madhabs in Usul, because he said the era is so complex. Shah Wali Allah Dahlawi, he's a great scholar from India. I got you. He said, I see that pen. He said, in India, I have to like teach with all the madhabs. Like one madhab can't handle the complexities of India right now. This is 300 years ago. Now in America, the theological challenges that we're dealing with are so robust and so fast, especially when AI kicks in, the new bioethics kicks in. I mean, we're gonna be pushed as a community. So we need to bring together rooting textually, but also rooting our minds in Islamic logic and universal principles. So one saves our faith at a personal level. The other allows us to project our faith at a public level. Right? Because you can't just go to like a non-Muslim and be like, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, and Imam Ibn Kathir said this, and Imam Ibn Hajar said this, and be like, what are you talking about? But you can be like Ibrahim and say, you see the sun, you see the moon, you see the stars, you worship that, you worship this, you worship that, you worship this. No. Okay, then you should worship the one who made them. That's that use of rationalism. So this book, alhamdulillah, is a book that was taught in Azhar. I translated it, alhamdulillah. It's taught to children, but don't freak out. Those children are ballers. And explained, and the way I explained it, and I'll finish now for my brother's sake, is I take education very seriously. I'm a teacher, man. My degree's in education. So when I teach, I get hyped. I'm not gonna sit here the whole time. I'm gonna come out there and get you. Everybody's gonna leave. Is that you have a classical text from Azhar, oh mashallah, ijazat, and mashaykh, alhamdulillah, turat Islami, it's so awesome. But oftentimes what we have is a translation of the language that doesn't translate into the culture. So what I did on Snapchat, I'm sure some of you have heard I'm there, is I asked young people on Snapchat, yo man, what do you think about God? What do you think about prophets? What do you think about angels? What do you think about hell? What are the questions you have that you always want to ask your imam, but you were scared to? And yo, I lost so much battery over the next 3 days because I got flooded with questions. So what I did, this is just the first print. This is not finished. The real one is going to be big because we were rushed to print this one out. Is I took the questions of young people and I put them in the text. So you have the translation of the classical book, but the questions are coming from who? From young people. So those of you who are teachers, right, we understand the power of the student-driven content, right? So it's student-driven content. So when we come back, inshallah, we'll start the text. If you want to grab it before we start, Ahmed's outside slinging them, you know what I mean, selling them, alhamdulillah. You can, and then we'll autograph them for you later, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi. No.
We have a lot of questions over here, so I'm going to try to.
We didn't even start.
Through as many as possible. We're just getting started. Alhamdulillah. First question is, how do you avoid emotions from consuming you when the news is filled with Muslim massacres and Islamophobia?
So how do you avoid emotions consuming you? Don't let them consume you. You know, 65% of happiness is self-initiated. But I think also, again, this is where you bring in people who are like emotional health professionals, clinicians. We did this in NYU, we did it in Boston after the bombing. Pastors, chaplains, not imams and sheikhs, we're not trained. We need also to sit on the couch, drink some Earl Grey tea. But I would say also you need to be careful of what you're exposing yourself. Like if you're exposing yourself to something to the point where it consumes you and depresses you, then you should pull back from it. Like remember what Ghazali said. Ghazali said, fear, like any emotion, right, is what he's saying. Any emotion that doesn't lead you to a better place, you should probably pull away from it for a while. You know, there's a great book, Amusing Ourselves to Death. Like you should read this book. And I believe also that the media, in the way that it's portraying the news is having a real psychological impact on people, right? Just so much negativity. And human beings, if you think about it, like my grandparents lived in the country. So for them, news was like 10 o'clock at night. That's when you got the news. Now it's like every 10 seconds. And I remember that they were much more empathetic people with less information than people who are flooded with information, and it becomes now a habit. Whatever, alhamdulillah, at least it wasn't 100 people that got killed, it was only 96. Like that's a problem. So I would say, what I would do is create a schedule, right? I'm going to catch up on the world events every day for like 30 minutes. Or twice a day for 30 minutes, right? Morning and evening. And then before you do that, do your adhkar. Or after you do it, do the adhkar. I mean, you give 30 minutes to the news, and then give 30 minutes to Allah. So that like there's some kind of, because the problem is when we see all this negativity and we're not able to do anything about it, it just creates a sense of frustration and guilt. Muslims are good people, like we feel really guilty. So one of the things you can do, just like make adhkar, make dua. So after I watch the news, after I get informed about what's going on, I make dua. I turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Just keep me like in 30 seconds, just bump me if I answer too long.
The next question, there's two questions that are kind of related to one another. One person asked, how does someone know what type of Islam to follow? And another one asked, I don't know if I'm Hanafi or Salafi. How important is that?
I mean, if you don't know it, it's not important. That's how you should think about it. Like, these are just terms, right? And these terms, unfortunately, like Hanafi, of course, is like for someone who's really studying, or Salafi, someone that's really studying, like headed down a scholarly route. That would be like going to Berkeley or going to Harvard or going to like NYU in law school, right? It's kind of different. That's how you should understand it. How do you know you're a right Muslim? Is that you're around the larger body of Muslims, you attend understand this rightness is not found with like 3 dudes in their closet reading a text saying we're on the haqq. Like that's never where Islam, remember, theology prepares you for what? Private life or what? For public life, engagement. Ukhrij linas, you given to the people, right? Privacy is with you and God only. But if you're like hanging out with like 3 or 4 people and all they do is talk about the scholar's horrible, the scholar's horrible, the scholar's horrible, the scholar's lost, the scholar's deviant, blah, 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 blah. Or those people who get an internet, you know, get a YouTube camera, a Geo or whatever, and they're like on there like, oh, the ummah's horrible, and I'm the answer. Yeah. Stay away from that stuff, man. That's not responsible. Remember this, we'll talk about this in a minute. Anything you study and anything you learn has to have really 2 qualities. It has to be meaningful, it has to be sustainable. When I mean sustainable, through your marriage, through your children, through your death. After you die, you'll still get hasanat. But if it's something that's only like a fly-by-night thing that's going to work between you and your 3 friends in a closet who are reading this book of haqq that one of them dreamt about, you're probably on the wrong path. So how do you know that you're on the right path? Being on the right path is to say, I believe in Allah, I believe in Muhammad, I believe in the hereafter. We'll talk about this in a minute. The majority of Orthodox theologians said, it is sufficient for a person to believe generally in Islam. But like, what if there's like this one little theological issue I don't know? Nobody cares. Hashtag nobody cares. You care, it's important for you, go and find the answer, but it doesn't mean you're like lost. Like Allah is not not gonna ask you about these kind of simple things or high level things. Who's your Lord? Who's your Deen? Who's your Prophet? Did you live a good life? Did you join Black Lives Matter? Were you against MLI, which should go MIA? You know, were you committed to the plight of people that were being oppressed, or were you sitting around and arguing about it? Like the sister Ahad Tamimi, when we put her picture up, oh, where's her hijab? Are you serious? You got a hijab on and you ain't even out protesting the cops. Like, what if she can't wear hijab because, you know, by the way, she may be exempted from wearing hijab because she's in a war zone. You know what I'm saying? You're in a war zone. It's not like, so should I go to like JCPenney's or like, should I order on Amazon? Like, oh, watch out for that bomb. I don't know. Hey, let's go to Rodeo Drive. Like, man, that's a judgment of opulence and ease of someone who's like, man, fighting for her dignity. God bless this girl. That's our Khaleesi, man. Without all the bad stuff. So, how do you know you're a good Muslim? Are you mean to people? Are you a jerk? Are you a troll? Do you hate imams? Do you hate the community? Then you're a bad Muslim. I don't care how much you pray. I don't care what kind of charity you do. Are you someone who's like loving and empathetic and cares about people and observes the foundations of Islam? Then you're on the right path. And you find that with the majority of the Muslims right here today. All these people are awliya of Allah. Imam al-Tahawi said, Al-mu'minun kulluhum awliya'ur Rahman. Imam al-Tahawi in his famous book in theology said, every believer is the friend of God. This is the foundational book that we all agree upon. Secondly, the Prophet said, La tajtami'u ummati ala dalala. My community will never concur on misguidance. So where we find the majority of the Muslims, alhamdulillah, then you know there's guidance there. And there's barakah, inshallah.
Let's do one last question then. What is a practical way for adult children to deal with constant emotional and spiritual abuse from their parents?
Jesus Christ.
Respect parents unconditionally and obey them is always said, but doesn't help.
Yeah, I mean, this is unfortunately much more, perhaps, I mean, it's not happening to everybody, but it happens, even sexual abuse. So I think, again, that's what you need to have, I believe, larger institutions. And I believe the American Muslim community is really at a moment of great opportunity. And like, again, you young people, like, very hopeful. You know, like, people ask me, like, parents will be like, so, like, on Snapchat, do they send you, like, bad pictures and stuff? And, like, do they, like, cuss and stuff? And they talk about smoking weed and, like, drive-bys and, you know. I'm like, no, man, they ask, like, really, really great questions. Like, the most common question I got on Snapchat after eyebrows is, how can I be nearer to Allah? Like, what a beautiful question, man. Like, that's the question I get every day. Every day. How can I get closer to Allah? That is the most common question I get. So that's why I believe larger institutions have to create relationships with social workers and clinicians, because this is a legal issue. Abuse is illegal. Not only haram, and di haga taniya. Haram bila shak. You know, if akla amwal al-yatim al-dhulma, if just taking the property of an orphan is forbidden, what about beating them or harming them physically? And then secondly, creating relationships where, because sometimes there are issues, social services get involved, you can destroy a family. I get that, there's concern. But then don't do things that are going to threaten, you know, your family. So you work within community institutions and organizations, and young American Muslims, Generation Xers, Millennials, Generation Y, and old people who are really doing a great job of funding things. We should commend them for this. Are scaffolding the community now where you are finding these kind of services. Like, for example, in LA, access, right? You have opportunity, get in touch. In Detroit, they have access, right? I would encourage someone going through abuse like this to reach out to one of these Muslim organizations that does this. They preserve your privacy. They don't put your business out there. You should not tolerate abuse. It's not being a good child to take physical abuse. It's not being a good child to take emotional or sexual abuse. That has nothing to do with birrul walidain. Absolutely nothing.